So good afternoon. Peter and I have been working in the media internationally for more than 20 years. So we work with all media, but today we want to share with you the current position and the opportunities for the print media in this digital age. Now I'm going to read this because I'm told to really stick to the time. Otherwise I'm going to be carried away. So I'm going to try to stick to the time. So it's very clear that technology touches us all. The hype around digital technology that has taken everybody by storm is algorithms, either rule-based or machine-learned algorithms. So let's put this in perspective. We all recognize situations where artificial intelligence meets natural stupidity. Alarms going off for no reason, or you end up with your car in the middle of nowhere because your sat-nav is telling you to do so. Over the last 10 years, it is these algorithms that has been determining how advertising money is spent. Programmatic has turned ad buying and selling into a commodity market. So it's driven by a set of simplistic rules based on a cost per thousand and a volume or repetition. So where did this lead us? So here is my dashboard. You view actually of what happened to publishers' revenue. On the top left, World Wide Web is expected to take 266 billion in paid for advertising this year. That is 42% of the total world ad spend. Yet only 10 years ago it only had 10% share and it now exceeds the TV ad spend. On the top right, 32 billion increase in US ad spend between 1983 and 2007 was wiped out in the following 10 years. So the bottom left shows you that the decline in print revenues was not made up by the digital sales. Not at all. Simply because the publishers found themselves in a commodity market, and that means a low cost per thousand. So on the bottom right, which is a very interesting slide, so I will expand that. Print circulation revenues as well as ad sales has also been declining, but this is very different around the world. In this post-financial crisis in the period of 2008 to 2012, some countries held their circulations, even the more advanced economies like Australia and Canada. But in the main, there were devastating losses, including those with a traditionally high per capita consumption of newspapers like Japan, Germany, the UK and the Nordics. So it looks like these algorithms, or so-called artificial intelligence, machine learning, has given the world gold. Let me show you. Why has this web been such a runaway success in ad sales? Actually, it's a self-contained ecosystem. It's covering the half of the world's population, and that is 3.5 billion people. It offers communication on an unprecedented scale from global to local. Easy and cost-effective to buy. It offers individual targeting capabilities, so a minimal of ad spend waste. It offers ad exposures delivered real-time. Huge creative opportunities, video as well as text, images, sponsorship, native and social dialogue. It reports ROI, from likes to click-throughs to actually sales orders. And who actually are the big winners? Yes, hooray, Google and Facebook. 43% share of ad spend. Google is twice the size of its nearest rival, Facebook. It turns Facebook twice the size of the 4 next biggest players. All other players, including the digital publishers, adds up to roughly the size of Facebook, but down in share nearly 40% in the last 2 years. So, big get bigger and small get smaller. It's very clear Google and Facebook are the 2 big threats to publishers. For publishers, it's the time to get together and create scale. Okay. Let's look at the other side of the medallion, the other side of this gold rush. It's only now that people are beginning to see the limitations. Is advertisers' love affair with digital and social media, in particular, beginning to cool off with dubious and non-transparent audience numbers, fraudulent non-human traffic, viewability issues, frequency overkill, increasing use of ad blockers, ad viewing only microseconds, hostile brand environments, privacy legislation. What we all seem to forget is that we are not machines. We are humans, humans in a digital world. Consumers are getting increasingly annoyed and angry and feel their private environment invaded. Here is a simple demonstration. Oh, I have to go back, sorry. Here is a simple demonstration. 35% find even 4 repeat exposures annoying. 30% describe themselves angry after 10 exposures. This is harming your brand, advertisers, and customer relationships. Trusted media provides much more value to advertisers. In this case, the ad was 88% more likely to be rated positively in Marie Claire than a virtually unknown site, Instructables. And the Land Rover, the ad was 71% more likely to be rated positively in a news brand, The Independent, than a virtually unknown site, Castor. Trusted and safe environments, they matter. And low-cost commodity markets do not provide this. So, major advertisers like Unilever and Procter & Gamble are finally raising these serious questions. Tesco, Europe's largest retailer, moves back to print. For the first time in 7 years, UK advertising revenue for news brands increased with a 1% growth, and overall 2.8% for the popular dailies in the first quarter of this year. So maybe we can whisper the G word. Growth in print. So I'm now going to pass over to my partner, Peter Masson, who will focus on what media research can do to support publishers and advertisers. Spasiba.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. So, as Josephine said, the World Wide Web is an ecosystem of its own, particularly in buying and evaluating the way that it sells and delivers advertising. There's a very big divide between the digital world and the real world in terms of data and planning systems. And in the real world, there's a big divide between the media in the way that they are researched. They are all in different silos. Now, we have a new situation. Publishers, for the first time, actually want data from the different silos put together. So that is what we're going to talk about. We started to do this kind of thing in Sweden about a decade ago. Not necessarily because we saw this digital thing coming, but because we believed that advertisers and planners really needed cross-platform data so they could look at data holistically when they were planning. So it stood us in good stead. So today we're going to talk about what role media research can play for publishers in this digital age. So the first example will come on how we've been able to connect offline digital planning to programmatic and evaluate online campaigns online, but using real-world target markets. The second thing we're going to look at is to provide a cross-platform media planning base as a means to engage in a discussion before the programmatic budget is set. And thirdly, which is often the first request of publishers, is to provide total brand reach and trend analysis as a management planning tool and public relations investor tool. It's our view that publishers have to create scale The problem is that Google and Facebook have got huge scale, and they operate in walled gardens with an all-embracing targeting data set of their own. Publishers actually need to pool ad sales to create this scale, and they offering buyers their own premium cost per thousand supply chain that matches Facebook's social media scale, yet providing data transparency and trusted environments. The latest such development is the Ozone project in the UK, but similar developments have taken place in the Nordic markets, very quickly on, and Romania. So, connecting offline digital with online. In the Swedish situation, we started tracking web development in about 2010, and the data was launched about 2013. Mobile was added later, and apps were added a couple of years ago. The data collection is digital tracking panels, and there's a slight overlap between them, but we started building separate panels as we went on. And there are technical reasons that are quite difficult to collect them all at once from the same respondent. On the other hand, we have an NRS, National Readership Survey, which is connected to target group data, TGI, and that's produced by Kantar CIFO. That's produced 3 times a year. So the first thing we have done is to make a decision that we're not going to issue the tracking panel data separately. We're going to issue it through the National Readership Survey. One, because when we put it there, it's in a very good sample structure. Panels often have problems on creating a good sample structure. So it's reweighted when it goes into the NRS, and it's issued together so we have the data of print and digital together. We don't use Fusion. Fusion's not a technique that we feel can control the duplication between media when the fusion is done. We have a different process. It's a modeling process, and then we calibrate it to the panel data. So in essence, we build internet behavior within the NRS, and we calibrate, that's for every individual, and we calibrate that so that it matches the original data set. So it's not a fusion, it's a calibration. Now we have this data set, which is in a form where the planning can take place in a time-based way. We keep, as it were, the same event-based data that you get from panels, and the planners planning digitally can use time planning, and the software allows them to plan with share of voice and capping procedures within their planning process. So now the digital planner can work with this offline data and use it as a brief for his buying brief, his programmatic buying brief. And there, the planner does not have access to the same kind of targeting information that you get out of TGI. So what we do is we send the target structure back to the tracking panel. The tracking panel, in the meantime, we have already added TGI data to. So we've done a scription to put it together. So when the target comes back from the planner, we can identify who's in the panel within the target, and we send those IDs to the ad exchange where we can identify them in the exchange web data and see what the planner has, the programmatic buyer has actually bought. And we can do a reach and frequency analysis, and we can feed that reach and frequency campaign back against and look at it as it was originally planned. So we have a before and after situation where we've involved offline data directly with online data. So we think that we're starting to bring the two quite different methods of working together and preserving the benefits that we get from the detailed targeting in offline data. So the second case that we want to talk about is how you try to improve print's share of the budget. And that means that we have to integrate print data with digital. And I've just explained that we did that automatically because that was something we had planned very early on. In making that choice of when you integrate them, which is going to be the host, what's going to carry the multimedia data. And normally, in our view, that is the print survey because it's of a better quality sample and it's got the targeting data. But we must add additional data on digital in the host survey to control the integration. So we have to add into the NRS quite a lot of information in order to make a good integration. Now we've got the data together, it doesn't mean the same thing. We've got a set of apples and pears. We have to harmonize the metrics that are used in digital evaluation and in print. The biggest difference between print and digital research, and indeed between print and TV and print and radio, is that print uses an ad hoc survey which is measuring, giving you a static measure of print behavior. It's an average issue reach. When you're dealing with a panel, you are dealing with event-based data, and you know when every advertising event in time takes place. And we think that it's extremely important to retain that knowledge when you integrate data. And so we have a situation where we turn panel data into print probability data. This is the way a lot of countries have gone. And you use print RNF models. They lose all the time dynamic. You don't anymore know when the actual advertising exposure took place. So this, in our view, is a big problem. Our view is to go the other way and turn the static print data into more dynamic data and to keep the event-based data of digital and also, in our case, television and radio. So the problems, the fourth point I made, is that metrics are not comparable. In print, we measure issue reach and not advertising page reach. So we overestimate net reach for publishers. It's not a good thing to hear from a publisher, but in the case of internet, you're measuring where the ad is delivered when the person is on site, given the viewability issues that we know about and they're trying to address. Secondly, print does not report multiple reading events. You actually pick up a magazine more than once, and therefore you have an opportunity to see more than once. But we don't count that in our measure. On the digital side, every time you go to a site within a given time period is counted as a new gross impression. So of course the cost per thousands look much better in that situation, and print is losing out. Normally, print has not, apart from doing specialized surveys, in the NRS it doesn't usually have any quality of reading measure, for example, time spent reading. In the digital environment, you know exactly how long, or nearly exactly how long, someone was on a site. Third, and the last point is, print assumes that all reading takes place at once. So if you're a planner and you put a cross on a date plan, where do you put the monthly cross? You usually put it at the beginning of the month. But that's not when the advertising takes place. It takes place through the month. You don't know when the actual event takes place. That's very dangerous for print, and has been over the years, when you do post-evaluation research. Because quite often you do the tracking on either recall or against ad sales in a period very close after the advertising has gone out. It's fine for television, it's all gone out. For print, it hasn't gone out. It's going to go out over the next period. And so you're losing a lot of the impressions that print has delivered, but you're not seeing the results because they're not yet there. So these are really big problems with our current average issue, recent reading model that print virtually uses worldwide. When we come to digital, of course, ads are not bought as issues in print, even though you may update your content, it can be at any time. Digital impressions are bought by quantity of individual browsers in a time period. Gross contacts are the key metric in what you do in digital, not net reach, as we always think of in print. So how do we try to improve this situation for print? Well, we add another question in the NRS, proportion of issue read, from issue exposure to ad exposure, can be then calculated. The second question we would add is the number of times the issue is picked up. That gives you a gross ad reading event, opportunities. And this reduces your cost per thousand significantly, puts you in a much better position as print vis-a-vis digital. Then we add, or can add, a time spent reading question. Strong argument for print that people spend time with print, much more than they do especially on mobile, but also with the web. Are we having, okay. So what do we do to add to the digital side within the NRS? We add primarily frequency of visit to each site by platform, and we ask some generic questions. From this, we can do our modeling, which I'm not going to go into. Now we're going to Greece. Let's assume that I'm a rookie ad salesman, and I've managed to get a lunch date with a guy who's a senior media planner in an agency. And I go along with the standard NRS, and I show him a set of statistics in which I'm trying to argue that he should use, because I'm selling my news brand, a Sunday newspaper, I want to sell not only the digital that he's buying, I want him to buy some print as well. So I leave him the bit of paper, and he comes back to me and he says, this isn't going to work. Look, here's print. You're not measuring the advertising. You're measuring an issue. Your net reach is too high. But what's this? You know, your gross impressions are the same as your net impressions. You're not taking into account time spent, number of pickups. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage. But I can't take note of that. I don't have any data in my planning. So, and what's this? No time. Again, I know print has a good reading time versus digital. But if I don't have the data, I can't act on it. Now this is very strange. The selectivity, I would expect print to offer a very good selectivity of my market, and I didn't explain that he is marketing premium vodka in Greece. And so in the terms of target market, it's not very selective, your Sunday. Okay, now if we go to the digital, yes, I see that it's recent visiting data, it's recall data, and it's relating to the ad. But what's this? 13.4% reach. That's my week reach. I don't buy a week in digital. I buy a share of voice. I can't afford to buy everything, and they wouldn't sell it to me anyway, the whole week. So there's a crazy figure to present to me. And therefore, the gross is way, way too high, something I simply can't buy. And I see something interesting. We've got time spent reading, time spent visiting. And that's impressive to me. So the set of data has got goods and bads in it, but it's not going to work for me. So we go back and we convince the NRS to add some more data. And here you can begin to see what happens when you add this other data. The print loses in the third column a little bit of reach. But in the next column, and the column after, it has my title has 2.2 readers per copy. I halve my cost per thousand as a result. Lost a bit of reach, halved my cost per thousand. Now we've got more data on digital, and I can buy a share of voice. He says, that's interesting. My 13.4% of reach at 10% share of voice doesn't give me 10% of the net, it gives me 5.7. So it involves the way that you are buying digital. And the package, in the end, if you go to the right, the cost per thousand between digital and print are the same. So I can make him an offer which is approximately just under half the price, and he's getting added reach from, if you look at the third column in, added reach because print and digital together give him 11.5, and there's relatively little duplication. So I learnt my lesson. We went back and we did this to the NRS, and now we have a much more viable case for a share to go to print before the digital budget is settled. Yeah, okay, last point is brand reach. Everything that we've done, from it flows the brand reach data. And we produce this as a dashboard for publishers, and they can see how their brand is performing between different target groups. Here we've got from Zen 7 to, Generation Z to millennials to the aged. And this particular publisher has produced quite a good profile across the whole population. We can show him his profiles, we can show him his duplications, we can show him his brand loyalties, and we can show him his growth and share changes. So, thank you very much.